Hollywood icons were more than just stars. They were heroes who swapped scripts for service in World War II. Instead of staying safe, they chose to fight. But why? What drove them to put their fame on hold? From daring combat missions to life-changing experiences, these stars' war stories are way more than you'd expect. Let's dig into how these actors' time in the war redefined their careers and how it changed them forever. The star who kept flying. During WOTU, Hollywood was not just about movies and fame. Many well-known actors left their film work to join the service. These actors didn't just support the soldiers from home, they were troops too, risking their lives in battle. These men took a break from their jobs to help, launching bombing missions over Nazi Germany and landing on the beaches of Normandy. They didn't do it for publicity. Many people did not fully appreciate their service later on and quietly managed the impact of war. Let's see what they did, starting with some of the most well-known people in Hollywood. Hollywood's biggest stars did more than just smile and pose for pictures during World War II. Some of them offered to serve without waiting to be drafted by Uncle Sam. This wasn't done just for a positive image. They could have stayed home and made war movies while pretending to be heroes on TV. Instead, they encountered real danger and changed from writing movie plots to following military orders. For some people, the change came as a surprise. One day, they were dressed in fancy suits at special movie events, and the next day, they were wearing military outfits, learning how to march, shoot, and survive. It went from being fun and stylish to following strict rules and facing challenges. Some people still haven't become very wealthy. They were starting their careers in Hollywood when the war began. When they came back, they weren't the same eager young people. They had changed into strong fighters who had gone through things that no movie could show. The question is, what did these actors go through during the war? How did it impact them? When they returned to Hollywood, did they act the same, or did their experiences change how they performed in their roles? Let's discuss a man who not only served in the military, but also became a famous war hero. A man who piloted planes during battles against Nazi Germany and kept flying after the war ended. Jimmy Stewart's story from the war is unforgettable. 8. Jimmy Stewart. When WOTU II began, Jimmy Stewart was already a Hollywood star. He had won an Oscar for The Philadelphia Story and was known as the typical all-American guy. When the war started, he didn't just act like a hero, he truly became one. In 1941, Stewart joined the Army Air Corps because he wanted to fight. But there was a problem. He was too thin. He needed to gain weight to qualify and didn't want any special care because he was famous. Once inside, he trained hard because he wanted to not only fly, but also lead in battle. And he did it. Stewart became a bomber pilot and flew 20 combat flights over Europe, which was controlled by the Nazis, with the 703rd Bomb Squadron. These flights were among the most dangerous of the war. Bombing runs over Germany encountered strong anti-aircraft fire and resulted in many casualties. Stewart was more than just a pilot. He led whole groups of planes and had to make important choices very quickly that could determine whether his crew lived or died. He received 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses, a Croix de Guerre, and several air medals for his leadership. He wasn't just a famous soldier, he was a real war hero. The war caused lasting damage. When he came back to Hollywood, Stewart had a hard time because he was dealing with what we now call PTSD. The burden of the war was still present, impacting his trust and job. His movies after the war didn't do well at first, but then he released It's a Wonderful Life. His strong, heartfelt performance showed his real-life challenges, making his playing more meaningful. Stewart's experiences in the war influenced his entire career. He took on deeper and more complicated parts in movies like Winchester 73 and Vertigo. After coming back to Hollywood, he stayed in the Air Force Reserve and finally became a brigadier general, which is the highest rank held by any American movie star. Stewart didn't only act as heroes, he experienced it. Clark Gable wasn't just a star, he risked everything, facing Nazi fire in the air during some of WOTU II's deadliest missions. 7. Clark Gable. Clark Gable was clearly the biggest movie star in Hollywood during the 1930s. He had it all: fame, money, and the title of America's Man. But in 1942, things changed fast. His wife, Carole Lombard, tragically died in a plane crash while promoting war bonds, and Gable was very sad. In a surprising decision for Hollywood, he didn't let his sadness take over or use his fame to escape responsibility. Instead, he joined the Army Air Forces at 41, an age when many might have avoided war. Gable didn't want an office job. He wanted to do something. He chose the harder path. Gable could have easily taken a public relations job, using his fame to promote ideas. But he said no. Instead, he learned as an aerial gunner, a risky job with a lot of injuries and deaths. After finishing his training, he joined a crew on a B-17 bomber and flew combat flights over Nazi Germany. Gable's choice to serve wasn't just a sign. He was putting his life on the line. Gunners on bombers had some of the highest death rates in the Air Force because they were always at risk from enemy fire. Gable faced it head-on. He flew many missions, dealing with real fighting and gunfire from the enemy. The war was not only risky for the crew, but it affected them on a human level. Gable's popularity was recognized. Hitler is said to have offered a reward for Gable's arrest, wanting to use him for propaganda if he was caught. Even with the increased attention on him, Gable continued his missions, taking part in many risky operations over Germany. The war had a permanent impact. When Gable came back to Hollywood, he had changed. He had witnessed war directly and faced its terrible consequences. Even though he kept playing in big films like The Misfits, his last movie, people close to him saw a significant change in his behavior. He used to be carefree and charming, but now he's weighed down by his experiences. The charm he used to easily show in movies like Gone with the Wind wasn't as strong anymore. Gable had faced death directly, and the light-hearted person he used to be was no longer there. Even though he attempted to go back to his previous way of living, the mental effects of fighting stayed with him. Gable didn't talk about his war memories like many veterans, but his friends noticed that he had changed. Gable would never go back to Hollywood with the same carefree attitude. His personal losses and the effects of battle changed him forever. He spent the rest of his life dealing with those thoughts. The image of Clark Gable, the King of Hollywood, was forever changed, as his legacy became intertwined with his sacrifice and service. Even though the war affected him, Gable's business continued to thrive. He kept playing until he died in 1960, but his time in the war was a key part of his life. For those who knew him, his role as a real war hero made him even more legendary. 6. Tyrone Power. Before 1-2, Tyrone Power was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, celebrated for his charming looks and roles in adventure films and romantic dramas. He was the ultimate movie star, famous for taking on adventurous roles and portraying brave heroes in films. When the war kicked off, Power wasn't just looking to play the hero on screen. He really wanted to be a hero in real life. Back in 1942, he decided to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps, which caught a lot of people off guard, given his level of fame. He wasn't interested in a cushy gig that kept him away from the action. Unlike some other celebrities, Power was looking for something to keep him occupied, so he decided to train as a fighter pilot. He got what it meant to be on the front lines and wasn't looking for an easy gig away from the action. The journey to power was not easy. Becoming a pilot requires a lot of effort and dedication, especially for someone who is already famous. After finishing his training, he was sent to the Pacific Theater to fly transport and dive bomber operations. He took part in the Battle of Okinawa, which was one of the deadliest and most fierce fights of the war. Power was not just a behind-the-scenes figure. He was in the middle of the action, dealing with enemy fire and the tough facts of air battles. People noticed his bravery and commitment. Power received several awards, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is a high honor for showing bravery in battle. He experienced the harshness of war firsthand, and it affected him deeply. He wasn't just a movie star. He had shown that he was a real fighter pilot in the Pacific skies. When Power came back to Hollywood after the war, things had changed. The man who was once a star in action movies now brought a new energy to his acting. After the war, his parts became darker and more complicated. In movies like Nightmare Alley, Power played deeper characters that were different from the charming, carefree parts he did before the war. The war changed him in ways that were hard to ignore. Power's character after the war showed the emotional and mental effects of his fighting experience. His eyes now had a new darkness and focus that they didn't have before. He was no longer just a bold hero. He was a man who had experienced the turmoil of war and gained a better knowledge of people. Unfortunately, Power's life after the war was brief. He died from a heart attack in 1958 at the age of 44. Even in his short life, Tyrone Power showed that his impact wasn't only in movies but also in the skies over the Pacific. His bravery and service in the war made a lasting impact. He showed that he was more than just a movie star. He was a true hero who rose to the occasion when his country needed him most. 5. Henry Fonda. Before Henry Fonda became the famous actor we recognize today, he was already known for playing relatable, ordinary roles. His figures often represented the voice of fairness, showing the importance of justice, hard work, and doing the right thing. When World War II started, Fonda wanted to do more than just act out those ideas on screen. He wanted to actually live them. In 1942, after the U.S. joined the war, Fonda joined the Navy, surprising many who believed a star like him would try to skip military service. That wasn't how Fonda did things. He reportedly said, "I don't want to be in a fake war in a studio," showing he wasn't interested in the glitz of war movies. He wanted to battle. Fonda was given a role on the USS Satterley, a warship that operated in the Pacific. He didn't just watch from the sidelines, he took part in the action. He took part in several important missions, including the D-Day landing at Normandy, where he faced enemy fire. Fonda's experience was real and not planned or rehearsed. He experienced real battles and received the Bronze Star for his courage during those challenging times. Like many soldiers, Fonda rarely discussed his war experience. The scars went deeper than what appeared on the surface. For him, it wasn't about wanting attention or applause. It was about responsibility. After the war, he returned to Hollywood. But his work was different. His experience in battle changed how he viewed things, and this change showed in how he performed. Movies like Mr. Roberts and 12 Angry Men showed a strong sense of duty, sacrifice, and honesty. Fonda's efforts now felt more significant than they did in the past. The war took away the excitement of being famous and gave him a calmer, more meaningful sense of purpose. These parts needed genuine feelings, not just acting talent, and Fonda provided what was expected. After the war, he focused less on being a hero and more on showing the quiet power and complexity of human life. The man who went to war now brought a new depth to his work. People saw him as not just an ordinary person, but as someone who had faced challenges and come out better. Henry Fonda wasn't just acting out duty, he lived it, facing real battles and earning honors in World War II's toughest moments. 4. Paul Newman. Paul Newman was starting his career in Hollywood when World War II began, and instead of remaining in film, he chose to serve in the military. He joined the Navy and trained as a radio man and gunner for torpedo bombers, hoping to be involved in the fight. But fate had other plans. Just before his group was about to leave for the Pacific, Newman was unable to go because of an ear infection. His team went on without him, and just a few days later, their plane was shot down. Newman's fellow pilots did not survive, and the close call affected him for the rest of his life. Even though he didn't fight directly, that lucky moment of life had a strong impact on him. The experience changed Newman in ways he never expected. Although he didn't experience the fear of fighting in battle, the training he received helped him build strong discipline and a sense of duty that remained with him. It also made him appreciate how fragile life is. His understanding that living can sometimes depend on luck shaped who he was, both in movies and in real life. After the war, Newman had an amazing career in Hollywood, but it wasn't just because of his good looks. His parts were intense and complex, which made him different from many of his peers. His performances had a genuine quality that felt like it came from a deeper place than just acting. Though he didn't have direct combat experience, his close call with death shaped his views and inspired his job and charitable work for many years. 3. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas was raised in a rough area in New York. His parents were immigrants from Russia and were Jewish. He had a tough journey to Hollywood fame, but he succeeded and became one of the most well-known stars of his time. When World War II started, Douglas quickly joined the Navy. He learned to be a communications officer so he could work on ships in the Pacific, but his service career was cut short. After he got hurt, Douglas was let go from the military for medical reasons. He didn't fight, but the event still affected him. The Navy changed how he viewed life and war, influencing his character and work after the war. In Hollywood, Douglas's parts started to show the strength and determination he gained while he was in the Navy. He acted intensely, often playing rebellious figures with complicated morals that reflected his own ideas of justice. This wasn't just luck. His time in the military gave him a strong sense of right and wrong, making him want to help others both in movies and in real life. Douglas was very committed to fairness, and he worked for it in many ways, not just by acting. He stood up against the Hollywood blacklist during the McCarthy era and actively supported soldiers and civil rights. His strong and sometimes rebellious parts showed his dedication to fairness and standing up against injustice, making him a symbol of strength in Hollywood. Even though Douglas only spent a short time in the Navy, it greatly affected how he saw the world and influenced his work and activism for many years. His parts might have been made up, but the bravery and commitment he showed were real. 2. Mel Brooks. Before Mel Brooks became famous for his comedy, he had a very risky job in the Army where he defused bombs. He was part of the 1,104th Engineer Battalion, which was responsible for moving mines to help troops move forward. In a job where one wrong step could lead to death, Brooks had to deal with danger and also find ways to beat it. The war showed him how strange life can be in ways that no movie could show. That ridiculous situation, along with the constant fear of death, helped shape his unique sense of humor. Brooks viewed war not only as terrible but also found a sense of dark humor in it. This viewpoint influenced his distinctive style. After the war, he used his experiences to create comedy, often making jokes about his time in the military that were clever and funny. Movies like The Producers came from mixing dark themes with fun. He made jokes about his time removing landmines, but it was obvious that the experience affected him seriously. Brooks had a talent for finding humor in events that others thought were too serious to joke about, which made him a legend. He had a talent for finding humor even in tough situations, using the challenges of war to inspire some of the most famous comedy pictures. If it weren't for the serious challenges he faced, Mel Brooks might not have become the famous comedian he is today. Mel Brooks found comedy in the risky job of defusing bombs, using the silliness of war to create unforgettable laughs. 1. David Niven. David Niven's story is not like many other Hollywood actors. He was not a young actor called to serve in the military. Niven was a British soldier before he became a movie star. When World War II started, he quickly went back to Britain to serve in the military. Niven joined a special commando unit that handled the most dangerous tasks in the war. One of his most important efforts was during the D-Day landings, where he experienced intense fighting on the beaches of Normandy. The landing was an important moment in the war, and Niven, like the other forces, struggled through the confusion and destruction. He didn't just have a symbolic part. He was heavily involved, risking his life with every mission. Niven received the U.S. Legion of Merit for his bravery, which is a special award for people who show outstanding service. Even with his awards, Niven often didn't talk about his service, reflecting the British habit of keeping personal matters private. He didn't seek attention or praise for what he did during the war. He had done what he needed to do, and that was satisfactory for him. When Niven came back to Hollywood after the war, his acting became much deeper. Although he still showed charm and humor on screen, there was now a hidden toughness from his experiences in battle. The tough hero was very different from the refined, often upper-class characters he had played before the war. In movies like A Matter of Life and Death and Separate Tables, Niven's experience in the war gave his characters a serious and realistic feel, making his acting memorable. After the war, David Niven combined his military skills with his Hollywood image, giving him a special style on screen. And that's a wrap on these Hollywood legends who served in 1-2. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to click on the next video popping up on your screen.